interested in finding out how the different models of communication can affect your ability to communicate with others, as well as how these different topics in communication can affect your everyday communication skills. I want to cover some great topics relating to communication. These relate to the communication process. They also relate to language and meaning behind communication. So these are all topics that I believe can affect how you communicate with others and how well you do so. I want to talk about the three models of communication. So the first model of communication is the transmission model. This is different from the other different models of communication. This is described as a one-way linear process where the sender encodes the message that is sent, and then that person transmits it through what we call a channel. And then the receiver of that message decodes the message that is sent and adds meaning to it. So let's say you are at a dinner and there's people, it's crowded. Maybe, as we all know, being in a huge crowd can be very, very difficult to communicate with others effectively. Messages can be misinterpreted. So that is kind of what we see in this transmission model. So an example would be you're at dinner, you're at a party, there's a lot of people around, you're talking back and forth with someone, but the crowd and everything around you can interfere with that message and how you interpret that message. It can also, affect your ability to understand what they're saying, and in that way, you decode the message. So it's kind of like you're decoding it based on what you think. So, the crowd can interfere with your ability to understand the message. So that would be an example of transmission. So that's when you decode the message. The next model that I want to talk about is the interaction model. So this is not a one-way linear process. It's actually a two-way process where the people that are involved in communicating, that they alternate different positions. So they'll alternate from the sender and the receiver. So, they both deliver meaning behind the message that is being, back and forth, and they receive feedback based on, they both receive feedback back and forth. So let's say you, and also in the in an example of transactional model or interactional model, we see that the participants that are delivering the message back and forth, there can be nonverbal cues present as well as verbal cues. So that is something that when we're looking at the interaction model that we definitely see. So let's say you're at work and you're talking with your coworker about a group project coming up or a team project. You're communicating back and forth about that topic. You're both giving feedback on that topic. So it's a two-way process. So it's not like the transmission model where it's a one-way street. No, it's a two-way street. When you're talking about the interaction model, you're going back and forth. You're sharing both of your feedback. So that is something that we see with the transmission model. For the interaction model, this is known as, we see from the transactional model, this is very different from the transmission and interactional model. We actually see that, it's a very different model. It is known as an exchange of information, and it's continuous. So you're going back and forth exchanging information, continuously. It's constant. So when we're talking about the transactional model, the sender and the receiver, they're basically taking turns communicating the topic. So, this is a model where it's continuous and they're talking back and forth about, the topic. So, this can be a face-to-face meeting. It can be a Skype call where you're going back and forth. You're both communicating. It's continuous. That's a example of transactional model. This leads me into how communication is integrated into all aspects of our life. So as I was talking about work and communication and, Skype calls, like these are, communication can be applied to all aspects of our life. It can be applied to the professional life, so work, or job interviews. It can be applied to personal life, relationships, how you engage with your family, and academics, how well you're doing in college. Let's say you have a group project coming up. Your ability to communicate with other people is crucial. Sorry. So communication is, it plays a huge role in how we communicate with other people. And it's our way of expressing ourselves. It's very, very important. It's a very important skill to learn. So I believe that, learning to practice communication is crucial because it's applied to all aspects of your life, not only academics, other personal aspects. So next thing I want to talk about is language and meaning. These are huge when it comes to communication. So if you think about it, all the words we use, there's so many English words that we use. There are millions and millions of words in English that we're using on a daily basis. But there's what I've learned to be very interesting is how we're generating those words. So, when we speak those words, we're getting, in a sense, we're getting meaning through our sensory system as well as our nervous system. So when, let's say, when meaning is generated from that word that you're talking about, sensory information is being interpreted, which is something we've learned. I found that very interesting. So when I'm talking about, symbol, I want to go into symbolic and how, language and symbols play a huge role in how we communicate. So language is very symbolic, and I did not realize that until we began to talk more in depth about it. So, as we've said, it's very important in communication and engaging with other people. It's very symbolic. When we talk, we use words, it's very symbolic. So let's use an example. So let's say you're thinking of the word good. Okay, good. So let's say there's different ways, we all have different ways in which we interpret words. So if I'm thinking about the word good, or like I say, that's good, someone could interpret that, and maybe they interpret it in a symbolic way, so they'll do like a thumbs up, so good, So there's different ways that you interpret words, and they actually have huge meaning. So language and symbols and meaning all are incorporated into communication, which is super interesting, and I found that very, interesting, that something that I use on a daily basis, like English language, that has huge meaning, and I never realized how different people interpret words and how they can interpret it in a symbolic way with, you know, verbal cues or nonverbal cues like hand movements, hand gestures. Maybe spelling out the word good is how someone would interpret that. Maybe actually saying it, spelling it on a piece, there's different ways that we interpret it. So that leads me to my next example. So if I'm thinking of the word good, you can verbally speak the word by saying good. You can communicate it non-verbally with someone by doing a thumbs up. I just find it cool that all the symbols that we use on a daily basis actually like represent something else to someone. Like it all is represented and interpreted differently to someone else, So I just want to conclude with how important communication is. As I've talked on all aspects of our life, it's important to, apply those communication skills to our professional life and our personal life, our academic life, whatever it is. It's very important. It's a very important skill to use, and I find it super crucial when it comes to developing and growing as a human being. Like, being able to communicate with other people is something that we're going to have to do on a daily basis, at home, at work, in school, and getting our education, in our career pathways, even going through the drive-thru or going to a restaurant. We are continually communicating with other people. So I find it very, very important to not only have an open mind about how communication can play a role in all those parts of your life, but also keep in mind of the communication models that I've covered in this speech. How when you're talking to someone or at work or at, in your family, like, think about how those models, how you're communicating and how you're applying those models to your life. So whether you're talking with, your coworker, it's a two-way, process that we talked about in the different models. I think keeping those models in mind will really help you grow in your communication skills, as well as when you're using your language and talking on a daily basis. Think about how other people are interpreting what you say, whether that's non-verbally or verbally. There's different ways we interpret information. So I just think that's really important when we begin to apply all these topics I've talked about to our own lives. That's when we really start to see, our communication skills develop, and how we engage with other people. So that is all I have for today. Thank you so much for being able to engage in my speech. I hope that you've been able to take something from it. I hope you're able to apply the models to your life, as well as keep an open mind about how important communication is and how important it is to engage with other people. It can play a huge role in our life, more than we know. So keep those in mind. But that's all I have for today. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.